YouTube, welcome to this video. It's going to be both an hypertrophy episode and a product review because I realized that if I just make a ring product review, it's going to take 3 minutes, so might as well combine them both. So I'm going to discuss today the use of rings for hypertrophy, and I'm going to also plug, quote unquote, the Iron Ball Strength Olympic rings because these are the ones that I bought. And I do think that they're a great product, so why not also give you a good indication of where you should go if you want to buy some. So, when it comes to rings, there is an important notion to keep in mind. There are certain lifts, or actually every single lift, who have what I would call a technical grading, meaning that they will require a certain amount of practice for you to be able to utilize them fully for hypertrophy. And that is going to be a learning curve for the most part. And until you can reach the top of the learning curve, you will not be able to utilize the lift. You will still make gains off of it, but for the most part, the limiting factor of the progression of that lift is not going to be strength, it's not really going to be muscular, it's going to be technical. A great example of that would be the front squat, but I'm going to make an episode for front squats only. And then there are other lifts that are not technical at all. A curl, for example, any idiot can do a curl. Some people still manage to do curls poorly, but for the most part, they're easy. So they have a low technical grading. Rings have a very high technical grading. And I would even say that when it comes to absolute mastery of the rings, they have the highest technical grading, meaning that for you who are going to buy those rings for hypertrophy, the amount of progression you're going to make when it comes to technique is going to be relatively low, meaning that if this is the peak of Olympic rings technicality, you're going to be around here. And that's fine. You don't need to be able to do those insane movements with the rings to be able to get bigger. That's a misconception that a lot of people have shared on YouTube Fitness. Again, you see those gymnasts with massive biceps, and you have people who make videos about it and who say, oh, if you can do an iron cross or if you can do this super advanced planche, you're going to have big biceps. Issue is, Olympic gymnasts do that and get those big biceps because it's the only thing they do. It's their sport, it's their passion. It's not your passion. And you don't have the time or ability to actually get to their level. It would be completely insane. Why? Because it would mean sacrificing everything else. To reach that technical peak, you would need to sacrifice everything else. And in that everything, it also includes the legs, because these guys don't have big legs. So unless you really don't care about your lower body and you want to be a specialist on the rings, I would advise you to completely forget about that. What you're going to be doing with the rings is baby stuff. It's low-level stuff. It's the easiest amount of tension, it's the easiest amount of technique needed. And as I said, to get to that through that learning curve is not going to take too long. That's the beauty of rings. They're quite accessible, meaning that if you have a background with bodyweight movements, if you've done some push-ups in the past, some dips in the past, some pull-ups, rings are pretty easy to get. For me, the first time I did rings, I could immediately do ring pull-ups, I could do ring rows. These are easy movements, and these are the movements you're going to use. Now, does that mean that you're never going to progress in terms of technique? No, absolutely not. You will, but your progression is going to be very small, and you're never going to get to the high levels of proficiency that those athletes and pro athletes get to. And that's fine, don't worry about that. But you can still use the variations for the progression aspect. So what is a ring? Well, it's a ring, duh. It's usually made of wood. I highly recommend the ones made of wood. Don't get the ones made of metal or plastic. They're slippery. They are damaged easily. They rust. They can cut you. Wood is your friend. It's perfect. It feels great in your hand. It has a good grain to it. And to me, it's just the superior option. And if you get the Iron Ball Strength rings, you're going to get them wooden regardless, because it's the only version they have, I think. So the ring is just a ring. You get a pair of rings. And the way it works is you're going to get une sangle, like we say in my language, and you're going to put it through like this, and you're going to eventually loop it. So the ring is by itself on a ring also. I'm not going to teach you how to do that. You should be able to do that yourself. You're not 5. But if you don't know how to, look up videos on YouTube. There are people who are calisthenic athletes who explain that better than I do. So what the rings do basically is they are going to give you a point to hang from or to push from that can be just put on any amount of rack. It can be put on a tree if the tree is solid enough. So for all of you guys who are stuck out of the gym because of the quarantine and the lockdown, this is going to be your best friend. There are, in my opinion, 3 things that are indispensable when it comes to training: a pull-up bar, rings, and elastic bands. If you have that, you can train. You will have a tough time for your lower body, yes, but still, it's better than nothing. And I will make a separate video for that. So as far as the rings goes, that's what you do. You're either going to hang from them or you're going to press them. You're going to push with dips, with push-ups, etc. So already, that tells you something. It tells you that you can only use rings for upper body. It does nothing for the lower body. And as far as the upper body goes, the movements you're going to mainly do with this are horizontal and vertical pulls and horizontal pushes. It's tough to do vertical presses with the rings unless you're able to do a completely vertical handstand push-up with the rings, which is extremely hard. So it's not going to be something that technically is going to be available to you, but that's fine. You will also, and I already described that a bit, you will hear people say that the rings are great for the biceps. And you might think, okay, I'm going to curl them. Yes, you will. But the biggest reason why they're good for the bicep is that when you stabilize in a press or a push and you lock the arms, if you rotate the arms inside, it puts tension on the bicep. Be careful with that, okay? Things that put a lot of stress and stretch on muscle also have a very high chance of injuring that said muscle or tendon. Keep that in mind when it comes to rings. And with everything in training, when you approach a new equipment that is going to involve new movements, you take it easy. If you get an SSB bar, you're going to load 100 pounds on that bar. Don't load even 70% of your max squat. You're not prepared. Your body is not used to it. You're going to get injured. For the rings, I advise you start with push-ups with your feet lowered, not elevated. Your feet need to be on the floor. The higher the rings are, the easier the push-ups. So start with an easy variation. For the rows, when you start the rows, same thing. Don't put the rings too high. When you're laying on your back, put them close enough. It's going to limit the range of motion, but it's going to teach you how to do the movement safely. And the biggest concern that you should have with the rings, outside of the bicep snaps, is going to be the health of your elbows and shoulders. Because rings are elevated, they allow you to go deep. When you do push-ups on the floor stops you. It's just like a bench press. So you can't overextend. You can't put the shoulder in such a level of flexion that it snaps. But it can with the rings. So be super careful. Do not do fast negatives on the rings, especially when you get started. Slowly lower it. Feel the stretch. Feel what is being stretched and get back up. Push when you feel like you're going too far. Eventually, and with time, the range of motion is going to increase. You're going to be able to go deeper for a deeper stretch, but take your time. It would be stupid to snap a pec or a shoulder using rings because they're supposed to be a great injury prevention tool. And the reason why they're so great is because they allow for that extra range of motion. They allow for that range of motion that you never really experience with the bench press because you can get deeper. I would also tell people to be careful. If you're going to do dips, if you're going to do any level of tricep extension, it's possible with rings. It's taxing on the elbows and the shoulders if you don't know what you're doing. So what I would advise again is when you start and you set up, and you first start with your exercises, when you do your presses or pushes, play with the shoulder positioning and try and feel what is going to feel right. I know that for myself, even though I was cautious, I still hurt my shoulder and my elbow when I first started the rings because I wasn't paying attention, I was internally rotating the shoulders, etc. The ring by itself is not going to injure you, you're going to injure yourself on the ring. So keep that in mind. As far as the exercises that I haven't covered yet for the rings, as I said, you can do dips with them. If you do dips with them, you can actually do dips with your feet on the floor. As a beginner movement, it's not going to take much from you. Then you can elevate your feet and put them on a box. And then eventually you can try to do them without touching the floor, with your knees raised. That's a little bit tougher. And again, when you do that with rings, pay attention to the depth for your shoulders, okay? A great thing with these guys too is you're going to find that because you are technically grabbing them, they are still mobile. when you grab them, which is not the case for a barbell or for the floor. When you do push-ups on the floor doesn't accommodate and you're not really moving, you can't really move the wrist as you do the movement. With this you can, because any level of wrist flexion, elbow flexion is going to move the ring with you. And this is why they are actually a great tool for people who have wrist pain when they do presses or pushes, because you can play around with it. You can do a normal grip, you can do a grip where your thumb goes through and you don't actually grab, while the weight actually is in between the thumb and the finger that I forgot the name of, which I think is the index. You can do one where you have a full grip, play with things. I would advise you not to do a forced grip with wooden rings because it's slippery and it doesn't really have a purpose, because a thumbless grip is already tailored towards reducing the stress on the shoulders, and that's not something that is going to be a problem with these. So that's going to be your best friend when it comes to doing those bodyweight movements, especially if you are too advanced for normal bodyweight movements. That's going to be a great tool. As far as what you should be doing in terms of programming and in terms of progression, I made a video in the motivation manga playlist where I actually have a program with rings. My philosophy with rings and with bodyweight movements in general, when I don't weight them, is to do them for as many reps as possible. And for certain movements like the rings push-ups and the rings rows, it's actually a good thing. So it's up to you. If you start loading a movement, doing as many reps as possible starts being useless. Not necessarily useless, but it's not conducive to progression. So I would advise you to start doing something that would be related to, for example, weighted pull-ups when it comes to that. But that's going to be mainly that. I'm not really going to give you any tutorials for ring rows, for bicep movements for the rings, because you can just look them up. I'm not a calisthenic guy, but I am a bodybuilder who uses calisthenic for hypertrophy because it's actually quite good. And the benefits you will mainly gain from this is, when it comes to upper body, you will find that frequency is your friend and touches of volume are your friends too. When you destroy your legs, I'm an advocate of just letting the legs rest for 2 days, then hitting them again. For the upper body, you can always sneak in a few sets of rings here and there. And the good thing is that this is going to help you accumulate volume and tonnage for the biceps, for the chest, for the shoulders, and for the upper back, which are areas that can handle that frequency. Some muscles, for example, the biceps, are going to burn out quick, but they are going to also recover quick. And the good thing with the rings is that the bicep is a supporting muscle. So it's going to, yes, be targeted, but it's not going to be a limiting factor for most of the movements. And the last thing I'm going to leave you with is the most underrated upper back movement can be done with rings. And that is the row. But it's not a normal row, it's an inverted row. And when you do an inverted row, you take the legs out of the equation and you use upper back only. And you would be surprised with the amount of variations you can try. You can try chin up grip, neutral grip, pronator grip. And whether you go here or here or here, depending on how you pull, on the width of the pull, you're going to find different parts of your upper back lighting up. And that to me is worth the buy. If you just bought these, again, I'm going to repeat myself, but the Iron Ball Strength, by the way, I'm not sponsored by them, you will have made a good deal. If you just buy these to do rows, that's it. You reimburse your investment. Plus, they're only $30. I haven't checked to see if they have still stuff in store, because I think a lot of people might have just rushed to get some. That being said, rings are a little bit underground. Most people don't know that they actually work very well for hypertrophy. So you might be lucky and be able to get a pair. So I highly recommend you do. If you have any questions about rings, we have a few calisthenic guys that are on the channel that will help you. Thank you for watching and have a good day.